Surprise, surprise. And we'll be still in the book of Luke, chapter 8. There is a lot in this chapter. We will be at least another week, probably two, before we finish up with this chapter, because there's so much in it. But we do have to kind of look back a little bit and review why Luke was writing this book. And some of the things that we mentioned at the very beginning of this gospel, according to Luke, because it informs us why Luke chose to put what he did where he did. The Bible is inspired, it is truthful, it is without error. And yet there are some places where there are details that are in one gospel and not in the other. How do you reconcile this? Well, each author, that is Matthew, Mark, Luke, they each had a different perspective. They had a different point to be made. And so different things were emphasized. John is actually the best example of this. He includes a lot of things that are not included in the other three Gospels. And the things that he mentions in great detail, the other three Gospels don't seem to focus on, because they have a very different intention. Yes, they're all trying to show forth Jesus, but they're trying to show forth different aspects of his life. They're looking at the gem of Jesus' life from a different perspective, and the light is reflecting off of different facets of Jesus' life. Luke, in particular, was trying to show Jesus in the most perfect or complete manner possible. We all know that if all of Jesus' actions were written down, the book would be huge. It would fill the sky, and you would empty all of the oceans to make ink for it. The book that would be required to write down everything that Jesus did. Luke, though, at the beginning of his gospel, mentions that he had sought out and he had verified and he had confirmed from eyewitness statements all of the things that he puts down. And so when we come to a place where Luke might say some parts of a story and Matthew and Mark might say others, we know that the parts Luke said were the ones he was able to verify. Some of the reasons he may not have been able to verify every detail of every story, eyewitnesses may not have been around by the time Luke came to ask. Maybe he just hadn't met those particular witnesses. As we've already seen, one of Luke's witnesses was Mary, Jesus' mother. And he has very personal and detailed information, not only about what Mary did and what she saw, but what she thought throughout this story. So he had gone to individuals, got their eyewitness testimony. And so we come to Luke chapter 8 and verse 26, and we have the story of the demon man the man possessed by a demon. Not a demon man. In Matthew and in Mark, there is mentioned that there were two men at the same time that Jesus met and healed of their demon possession. But Luke only mentions one man. And again, this is not because Luke was wrong, but this is because this is what Luke could verify. Luke met someone, possibly even this demonic man, and got an eyewitness account, and this is the details he put down. And the point is still the same. Luke wants us to see that Jesus truly has power over demons, over devils, and not only that, but Jesus' ministry has a great effect because of the miracles he produced. His ministry was not miracles. His ministry was to impact the lives of the people who came to hear him. And so we'll begin reading in verse 26 and go down to verse 40 of Luke chapter 8. And they arrived at the country of the Gadarenes, which is over against Galilee. And when he went forth to land, there met him out of the city a certain man which had devils a long time, and wear no clothes, neither abode in any house but in the tombs. When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell down before him, and with a loud voice said, What have I to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of God Most High? I beseech thee, torment me not. For he had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man. For oftentimes it had caught him, and he was kept bound with chains and in fetters, and he brake the bands, and was driven of the devil into the wilderness. And Jesus asked him, saying, What is thy name? And he said, Legion, because many devils were entered into him. And they besought him that he would not command them to go into the deep. And there was there an herd of many swine feeding on the mountain. And they besought him that he would suffer them to enter into them. And he suffered them. Then went the devils out of the man and entered into the swine, and the herd ran violently down a steep place into the lake, and were choked. When they that fed them saw what was done, they fled and went and told it in the city and in the country. Then they went out to see what was done, and came to Jesus, and found the man out of whom the devils were departed, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. They also which saw it told them by what means he that was possessed of the devils was healed. Then the whole multitude of the country of the Gadarenes round about besought him to depart from them, for they were taken with great fear. And he went up into the ship and returned back again. Now the man out of whom the devils were departed besought him that he might be with him. But Jesus sent him away, saying, Return to thine own house, and show how great things God hath done unto thee. And he went his way, and published throughout the whole city how great things Jesus had done unto him. And it came to pass that when Jesus was returned, the people gladly received him, for they were all waiting for him. We have here the story of this man possessed with many devils. First, I want us to see his state. That is, what he was like before he met Jesus. In verse 27, we read that he had had these devils a long time. This was not a short-term problem. This was a perpetual, a chronic problem that he had. He had these devils a long time. Some of the effects. Number one, he wore no clothes. That's a warning sign. If you see somebody who goes around, they don't wear any clothes, it's probably a problem in their mind. And these devils, they caused this man to tear off any clothes that he had on. Also, look, he neither abode in any house. He didn't want to live in a house, not in a house in the country, not a house in the town. He wanted to live in the tombs. Most of us avoid the tombs. In fact, I don't know about you, but I haven't even been to a cemetery recently to walk past the tombs in Wagga recently. That's not something that I just do. But here this man didn't just pass through, he lived there. And this is even more strange when you consider the tombs in those days were often caves. They were dug in, not dug down. And they were dug into the side of these hills, and there might be multiple people buried in these caves. And they probably were accessible. He wasn't just living in a house in the middle of the cemetery. He was basically making his home the grave of dead people. He was crawling into bed with dead people. It's pretty scary. It's pretty gross. It's hard to imagine. But here he is. He's running around without clothes. He doesn't want to live in a house. He doesn't want to be enclosed inside a building. He lives with the dead, and he lives in the dead house, the house of the dead. He doesn't come out. Not only that, but we find out in verse 29, not only is his place and his state, that is what he was wearing, what he looked like, so disheveled, but also he was often caught up, bound with chains, breaking them. He was very strong. These devils had given him strength. Now, I don't think that they gave him strength like God gave Samson strength. When God gave Samson strength, he was able to pull down buildings, tear gates off cities, defeat lions with his bare hands, all of those kinds of things. God gave him great strength, but it did not have any damage to himself. These devils instead gave him great strength, ignoring the damage that would be done to him. He broke the bands and probably hurt himself on his way out of being chained and bound. He was a driven man. Here is this man. He's in a bad place. He's in a bad way. He's out on the countryside. He's out away from people. And then Jesus comes. Jesus knew this man would be there. This is something we can take comfort in. Jesus was not taken by surprise that all of a sudden there was a demon-possessed man there. He purposed to be at that place at that time. You know, it's hard to make a schedule with someone who never is at home. And someone who doesn't abide by the normal lifestyle. It's hard to get in contact with them. But Jesus knew where this man would be. And so, as he came across that Sea of Galilee and has that storm happened and all of that, he ended up at this place, the country of the Gadarenes, at exactly the right time to come across this man. Jesus had an appointment with this man. As we've already said, this man had these devils a long time. He was well known for it. It wasn't a surprise. Jesus didn't make this up. It wasn't faked. Here's this man who is quite destroyed by the devils. What is this response from the devils and the man? Well, in verse 28, Jesus has commanded the demons to come out of him, and he cries out and falls down before Jesus. This is the response all of us should have. I mean, just think about this. Jesus and the disciples, they've all just come out of these ships. They're all coming up this hill out of from the lake, so they're coming up. And here this man comes out, and he is crazy, looks awful. And Jesus starts to speak to him, and he falls down before Jesus and cries out with a loud voice. And notice what he says. "What have I to do with thee, Jesus, thou Son of the Most High?" Jesus hadn't introduced himself yet. At least we don't know that he had. This demon knew who Jesus was. And notice how well he knew. He didn't just know that Jesus was a person. He didn't just know that Jesus was the Son of God. But notice he says, "Jesus, thou Son of God, Most High." It is a little bit interesting in the Greek that adjective, Most High, it's uncertain whether it applies to Jesus or to the word Jesus or to the word God. But either way, it magnifies who Jesus is. He truly is the Son of the Most High God. He is not the son of some idol. He is the Son of the Most High God. And Jesus himself is Most High. God Most High. And so when this devil cries out with this loud voice, he is begging for his life. This is the response most of us should have when we meet Jesus. We should realize where we stand in the pecking order. You know, there's God, and then there's angels, and then there's people, and then I'm not even the strongest people, and down, that's where we are. And here these demons, they knew they were not strong enough, even though there was a multitude of them. I want us to quickly jump to verse 30 where Jesus asked the name of this devil, and the devils say, "My name is Legion, because there were many entered into him." Legion is a large number. It's an army term. It's a large group. Even many, many, many thousands of demons could not stand against Jesus, but had to fall at his feet. They had to fall at his feet. We need to see ourselves. We are not as powerful as devils or angels, and we too should fall at the feet of Jesus. Not just for salvation, although you must come to Jesus humbly for salvation, but also every day of our lives we need to fall on our faces before the Son of the Most High God and say, "What have I to do with you? I'm nothing, and you are all in all. You are the Most High." Because unless we see who Jesus is, we will not be able to entreat him properly. That is, we will not be able to ask Jesus for the things that we would like. Now here this devil asked Jesus for something, and it's a little interesting what he asked. First, this devil says, "I beseech thee, torment me not." The devil just said, these devils or demons said, "Don't torture us. Don't torture us. We're having a good time here. Don't torture us." Jesus had the authority to torture them. Not only that, but in verse 31, Jesus was further beseeched or asked that he would not command them to go into the deep. That word, the deep, there is the word for abyss or the pit. This is referring to the place reserved for the devil and his angels. The place before the final judgment place, but the place that will be cast into the lake of fire forever and ever. The pit. And here the devils are asking Jesus not to send them directly to their eternal punishment, but instead to let them live it up for a little bit longer. Jesus heard these demons cry. Now I know this is probably not the way you've heard this story before. Jesus heard what they asked him. He not only heard it, but he answered them and gave them what they requested. Sometimes we look around us and we see people who are going against God and we say, that person's bad and wicked and God's not going to help them. And then we look at ourselves and say, but I've been serving God and therefore God will answer my requests. But we know from other passages that it is not our righteousness that buys us any influence with God. It is our recognition of our need of help and then our coming to God and it fitting with his plan. You see, God had a plan, and his plan included scaring the people that lived around this demon-possessed man. We're now going to skip down to verse 34, because this is a familiar story, and we're going to get back to some of the actions that happened. But Jesus had a purpose, and the demon's request played right into it. Jesus wanted the people all around to see his power. Verse 34, when they that fed them, that is, fed the swine, saw what was done, they fled and went and told it in the city and in the country. So the word goes out that Jesus is here, and that he is here with great power, great authority. Verse 36, they also which came out, they which saw it, told them by what means he that was possessed of the devils was healed. Verse 37, then the whole multitude of the country round about besought him, that is, besought Jesus, to depart from them, for they were taken with great fear. And he went up into the ship and returned back again. Jesus wanted to have an impact on the area of the Gadarenes, and he knew that they were not excited about seeing him. It was only a short ship ride across to where Jesus had previously been. It was only a couple of days travel maximum to get all the way around the Sea of Galilee. If these people in the country of the Gadarenes had any interest in hearing what Jesus had wanted to say, or had believed that he was able to heal them of their illnesses, they would have traveled to see him before this time. In other words, Jesus was having a surprise visit to a bunch of people who didn't care that he was come. They didn't believe that he was going to do anything amazing, and they basically couldn't be bothered to go seek him out. And so when he came, he wanted to shock them. He wanted to grab their attention. And he did. When he cast the demons into the swine and the swine all died, the people around got really afraid. We already read that they were afraid. In verse 35, they were afraid. In verse 38, they besought Jesus to go away. They were afraid of Jesus. They realized he had power and authority. Later, in a few chapters, we'll see that Jesus comes back to this region. He comes back to a few cities in this region, and he is met with a very different reception. Instead of being asked to leave, he is welcomed in. Jesus wanted to grab their attention, and so they saw this huge loss financially. They saw thousands of swine go over the edge and die. That's a lot of value that just disappeared. They also probably looked at that man who was demon-possessed, and they thought, well, maybe our lives will be a little better because he's not demon-possessed, but really he's never done anything for this community before, so what good is it to us to have this man? We would rather have had all of those swine feeding on the side of the hill. And so Jesus was scary in that he was powerful. He was also scary in that their livelihoods might be affected, that it might cost them something. But they could not argue with the results of his healing this demon-possessed man. In verse 39, Jesus' intention all along was to leave a witness there. As we've been going through the book of Luke, we've seen Jesus come into towns. Sometimes he would send his disciples ahead, and then a couple of weeks later he might arrive there in that town and he'd be met by large crowds. And he would see many people come out into the middle of the wilderness for him to preach to them and to do miracles. But here he leaves a man behind whose life was changed drastically. And not just changed for a day or two. We hear of healers and healing ministries, and a lot of them, people are free of their cancer or able to walk again for a few days. And then you find out it was a fake, or it was a hoax, or they weren't really cured of their cancer, they're actually still going to die. It's just taking more than 2 days to see it. Here this man was healed, and he wasn't just freed from these demons for a day. He was left as a witness for day after day after day. And I'm sure all the people around him, they kept watching. And it was probably something they talked about a lot. When something big happens, the rumor mill starts up and people start paying attention. And here this man, his life has been changed, and Jesus met with him, and he's no longer demon-possessed, naked, living in the caves, in the graves of people who are dead. He is now clothed in his right mind, working, doing things, telling others about how great things Jesus had done, and they probably kept an eye on him. They'd come by and say, have you heard about that man? Is he still in his right mind, or has he gone back to being demon-possessed? Is he still talking about Jesus? Still 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later? Yes. He was a witness for Jesus for a long time, and before Jesus came back to that area. But his consistent witness of what great things Jesus had done proved to all the people around that the minor loss of a few swine, which, by the way, Jews weren't supposed to be having or eating, was nothing compared to the great blessings that this man had received. Yeah, we will talk about it just for a second. These swine, the Jewish people were not allowed to eat pig at all. It was forbidden. And Peter, even when he was being given the different meats that were unclean, swine was one of those that he was like, no, I'm not going to touch it, because it was unclean. It's something the Jews were not allowed to be near, the pig, dead or alive. And so here, these Jewish people who were having these great herds of swine, even if they weren't eating it themselves, they were going against God's requirements for his people. They were willing to go around God's law for a great profit. And so these swine were up on the hill, and we're going back to see what happened, right? We've kind of mentioned it, and you probably know the story. But here, the demons have been beseeching Jesus, don't send us out, don't torture us, don't destroy us, don't throw us in the everlasting pit. Please. They were asking him. But then in verse 32, there was a herd of many swine feeding on the mountain. Jesus suffered the demons, that is, he allowed the demons to enter into the swine. I'm not sure why they would want to be in the swine. It doesn't sound like a good thing to me. If I had to pick an animal to be trapped in, that would not be the one. But these demons, that was a better option for them than going into the pit. There's this large number. What happened to the swine? As soon as these devils entered into the swine, this herd ran violently down a steep place into the lake and were choked. These demons did not have a very good freedom. They didn't have a very long-lived freedom. Their freedom in the swine was only a matter of minutes. It didn't take long for the swine to go off the cliff and drown. Yet they begged Jesus for this little bit of enjoyment that they could take. Why did they run so violently? Well, we do have a little bit of a hint. The demons had shown a great deal of power and just craziness in the man that they had possessed. And so you can imagine these pigs that are eating peacefully on the side of the hill, now all of a sudden getting possessed with angry demons. They just didn't care about their own life. They went and did what these devils wanted them to do. And basically, they pushed themselves over the edge because they were crazy. We don't, as we look around us, claim people to be possessed by devils much anymore. At least not in this country. I don't think that we are devil-free in this country. But I think we often blame things other than the spirit world for things that are definitely spirit possession. Now, that is not to say that there aren't people who commune with devils or witches' covens and things like that, and that does exist even around here. And we should be wary of that. But we do not need to fear the devils to the point where we give in to them or where we cower from them. Instead, we need to realize that they just cause people to destroy themselves. They cannot keep us from serving God. They cannot destroy us, and we have one with us who has the power to turn the devil's greatest wish into their downfall. The devils thought they had found a way to get away from Jesus utterly destroying them. They were going to go into these swine, and it was going to give them a way out. But instead, it turned out to be their destruction, and they went hurtling over the cliff and died. God is able to control the demons. He is able to control those devils that had possessed this man, and he turned what they wanted to do to his own benefit. Yes, the people of the Gadarenes rejected Jesus in the short term for fear of their financial good or for fear of someone who was powerful enough to actually cast out demons. But later they would turn to Jesus and see that he was able to deliver them. I want us to spend the last couple of minutes here looking at verse 35 and seeing the state of this demon-possessed man after Jesus had healed him, after Jesus had cast out these devils. In verse 35, then they went out to see what was done, and came to Jesus and found the man out of whom the devils were departed, sitting at the feet of Jesus. Now this is the same phrase that is used of Mary, who would sit at Jesus' feet while her sister was doing all the cooking and cleaning. Sitting at the feet of Jesus is not merely just sitting down, but sitting and paying attention to what Jesus was saying. In other words, this man had gone from running around naked and living in the tombs to sitting and paying attention to Jesus as he was teaching them. I don't know if you've ever seen little kids. We have a couple of them, and they do not like sitting still unless it's exciting to sit still. Like you have to be reading them a story, and it has to be entertaining. And if there's anything else going on, it might take their attention away. Here is a man who has not paid attention to other people for years. He is chronically not paying attention. He's running around crazy man, living in the tombs, and yet here he is sitting at Jesus' feet, listening to Jesus. And Jesus didn't have a PowerPoint or a funny ditty that he sang as he taught. It was speaking. Jesus was teaching, not entertaining. And this man just sat there and listened. Notice also it says that he was clothed. A point is made that he was clothed. So before they couldn't clothe him, they would put clothes on him and tear him off. They would try and tie him up and he would break the bands off him. He would break the iron. He would take the shackles off. He would run around. But now he was actually clothed. Not only that, but he was in his right mind. Obviously, before this, he was out of his mind, running around. Again, children sometimes seem to be like this. I'm not saying all children are demon-possessed, but sometimes they seem like this. They're running around so wild, and when the girls get really tired, they do this a lot. They will be running and just going crazy and bounce off the wall, literally, you know. A couple weeks ago, Wednesday night prayer service, Sophia just was over it. She ran into the wall, literally, because she was just so tired and out of it. Well, this man was the opposite of that. He was in his right mind. He was able to think and reason and see what was being said, understand it, and apply it to his own life. He was a thinking man, not just a man running around crazy. Even this was enough to make the people of the city be afraid. I want you to notice that the people came out to see what had happened, and they saw this man, and they probably were thinking, this is the man that if we were sitting this close to him before, he would have killed us. But now he's sitting at Jesus' feet, and he's not looking crazy. He's not dressed with nothing. He's not running around. He is thinking. He is talking. He is behaving himself like a normal person. And they were afraid. They realized that this was a dramatic change. This was something that no science, no care or concern could heal. These devils had destroyed this man. And he now was sitting in his right mind because Jesus had done something miraculous. Hopefully, you and I do not quite have the same testimony as this man. But I hope that it is the same in certain aspects. I'm not saying I wish that you had had a demon possessing you before you were saved. But I hope that you see the great difference between when you didn't know Jesus and now that you do know him. While you still might do some things that are not the wisest, hopefully your right mind is in control and you are not out of control. Hopefully you are living with people in houses, not living in the tomb with the dead people. Hopefully you are clothed. And we could spiritualize this and go a step further that direction and say, have you the righteous garments that Jesus wants to provide you? You know, the best thing that you can do is take off the old garment stained with sin and put on the righteous garments that Jesus freely offers you. And are you keeping those garments clean and white? But really, the biggest difference between before and after was that this man went from listening to demons who only wanted to hurt him to listening to the precious Son of God Most High. And that is what needs to characterize us. We need to be known as those who hear and obey the Son of the Most High God. We need to be sitting at his feet. When I was a child, I often would see my dad reading his Bible and having prayer. And even to this day, the first thing he does after he gets up and has his cup of coffee is he opens up his Bible and has a devotion time with mom and Joseph, that is my baby brother, and then he will often have a separate time for himself. But that's every day. He sits at the feet of Jesus every single day, and it's there for everyone to see. Recently, I've been challenged to be more consistent with having a family devotions. If you do not have a family devotions, do. It's really good. The girls like me sitting there and singing with them a few hymns, and then we read a Bible story together. And they're liking it, which is great, because they didn't sit still very much before. They're getting old enough now to sit still for the 5 minutes that takes to do it. But get into the practice of having a group sitting at the feet of Jesus, but also individually, you sitting at the feet of Jesus, because that is the only way to avoid being like this man was before he met Jesus. And this is the only way to have the impact that he had in turning a whole region towards Jesus. This one man's testimony turns all of the people on that western side of Galilee towards Jesus. They all wanted to serve him. They all wanted to hear what he had to say after seeing this man so changed and living a consistent life, following the principles of Jesus that he had taught him during this very short interaction. We don't know how many minutes or hours this man was sitting at the feet of Jesus, but his life was radically different. Not only from the way he had been before, but also from the people around him. He was following Jesus' request that he love his neighbor as himself. He was following Jesus' suggestions about how to live like a kingdom citizen, an Israelite indeed. Those attitudes and actions that Jesus taught all throughout his ministry, this man exemplified after a very short meeting with Jesus. So I ask you, are you like this demon-possessed man? Before or after he met with Jesus? And can you make your life as impactful and well-known as this man did through his consistent, everyday testimony to his neighbors and family of how great things God hath done unto him? And that's what we're going to finish on. We're just going to read Jesus' statement in verse 39. He said, "Return to thine own house, and show how great things God hath done unto thee." That's the challenge for this week. Show how great things God hath done unto thee in your own house. Let's pray.